Okay, great. So thanks so much to everyone for joining us for this KISS Patent webinar. So you want to be acquired. A service of KISS Patent, we put the power of patents in the hands of startups. So that's me. I'm your presenter, Devorah Graeser. I have 21 years of patent experience. I'm a U.S. patent agent, meaning I'm admitted to the U.S. Patent Bar. I programmed for the Human Genome Project, but I was also in-house for a few years at a company called Compugen. So I've been on both sides of the table, and I know what it's really like to need to protect your ideas with, of course, a limited budget, as startups always have to be careful with their budgets for patent work. Having been on both sides of the table, I feel I can give really good advice to startups on what you really have to protect and the best ways in order to protect it. I have to also apologize. I seem to still have a bit of a cold, so every so often you may hear a bit of a cough. I'll try to mute beforehand, but if I don't, I apologize in advance. Okay, this is what happens when you spend too much time hanging out with lawyers. Nothing in this presentation or in any material provided, whether verbally or in writing, constitutes legal or patent advice. So did you know patents increase your startup's valuation by $1 million per patent filed? This number is widely accepted by VCs. I've had VCs tell to me personally. I've seen VCs publish it on blog posts, give that number in interviews. It's a generally accepted number. So patents are a really inexpensive way to increase your startup's valuation, which, as we'll see later on, can actually really help you in the case of getting acquired. Patents are also shown to increase sales by 51% and to increase employment growth in startups by about 20 to 36%. It's not possible to know whether this is correlation or causation. The study simply noted that there was the correspondence between these numbers, but I believe it's quite likely that indeed sales and employment growth could increase for startups with patents. First of all, because they have higher valuations, meaning that they have to give up less of their equity in exchange for funding from investors. And also, it really helps startups who have large companies as clients. Large companies like seeing that their suppliers have patents, so that there's less of a concern about being attacked for patent infringement than the supplier not having a defense. And also, it's a good reason to work with that supplier, as it shows that the supplier has innovations that can be protected. So what if you want to be acquired? Let's say this is your goal. How are you going to go about doing it? What do you have to do? What do you need to know about acquisitions and what kind of state you have to be in? Well, an acquisition, meaning another company buys your company, that is, you sell your company, is a type of exit strategy. And exit strategies are generally very important for startups. Startups should always know what they plan to do when they get into the business in order to leave that business. Now, it is true that not all startups may want to have an exit strategy. I'd say the vast majority of my clients all have an exit strategy. They all plan to have an exit, typically in 3 to 5 years, sometimes longer. For some very technical startups, it could even be up to 10 years, but they all have that exit as their end goal in mind. And this is true for a few reasons. One of which is that an exit strategy is required if you have investors. And these investors are going to want to discuss your exit strategy before they invest. And a big reason for this is simply that the investors don't get their money back until you exit. If you don't exit, they don't get their money back. So this can be a not bad situation for a startup. A startup can continue going for many years quite contently, but the investors will not be content because their money then is tied up in your startup and they can't get it out. If you don't have investors, yes, it's true, you don't necessarily have to have an exit strategy. You could decide to keep this company going for years. But then what happens when you get older and when you want to retire? So even if you don't plan to exit right away, at some point you are likely to want to exit. For successful startups, typical exit strategies are either to A, be acquired, or B, to file an IPO. And I'll consider each of these in order. So first I'm going to consider an IPO as exit strategy. And part of the reason for this is simply to show you how difficult an IPO is and why so many startups prefer an acquisition as their exit strategy, why they prefer to be bought by another company. So an IPO, as you know, I'm sure, is an initial public offering. in order to have an IPO, in order to be permitted to do one, or certainly to have a successful one, there are certain requirements you have to fulfill. The Nasdaq, for example, has a strict requirement of a valuation for your startup of at least $550 million. This is just a requirement they have. Facebook, for example, was estimated to be worth $104 billion at the time of its IPO. You don't have to be worth that much. You don't have to even be a unicorn. That is, these startups that are worth at least $1 billion. But you do have to have a pretty hefty valuation for the Nasdaq. Now, for other markets, it can be much lower. For example, a typical valuation for other markets overseas outside the US could be $50 million. That's actually quite typical for AIM, which is a secondary, or rather a startup-oriented, I guess you could say, London IPO exchange. It could even be lower than 50 million. I've seen companies go IPO at 20 or $30 million valuations, but these would be done then outside the US. If you're going to go for the Nasdaq for an IPO, you have to have some very, very serious numbers. Your pre-tax earnings in the prior 3 years have to be at least $11 million, and you have to have a total cash flow of at least $27.5 million for the past 3 years with no negative cash flow in any year. So these are really strict requirements, and they're very hard to fulfill. And this indeed is one of the reasons why startups are preferring to go for acquisition. So what you need before an IPO? Well, you have to meet the cash flow, revenue, and valuation requirements of the exchange. You have to show strong growth and also reliability of earnings. Volatility of earnings is something investors in publicly traded companies don't like to see. One of the reasons why they're in publicly traded companies and are not, for example, looking to fund a private company. They don't want to be an angel investor. They don't want to be a VC or participate in that type of investment. They want to have reliability of earnings. They want to have some stability, and they also want to have transparency as well as reduced risk. Now, another issue before you go for an IPO is you have to have good market conditions. If the last IPO in your space before you decide to do it had a really low valuation, turned out badly for whatever reason, it can be very hard for you to do it. So there are quite a few factors which are out of your control for an IPO, which are less of a problem when it comes to getting acquired. As an example of this, in the food delivery space, Blue Apron had a bad IPO. Their stock tanked. And so a number of other companies who were thinking of doing an IPO in this space actually decided to wait and hold off because it wouldn't have been successful given how badly the Blue Apron IPO went. Now, it is possible to get everything ready for an IPO and then to sell your company. And there was at least one case recently where a company sold for more than the amount of its valuation plus the evaluation amount after the IPO, that is the total amount it would have gotten. Another company decided it would rather pay a premium and buy that company. So you can actually be bought at any point, and that company is worth over $1 billion. So it is possible to decide you're going to go for an IPO, go all the way up to the preparation, they were getting ready to file and do everything, and at the last minute, they were sold. They decided they'd rather be acquired. So do patents help an IPO? Well, yes, patents are a requirement for many investors, having patents. Now, I'd like to say that all investors check the quality of the patents deeply, but at least from what I've been told and from what I've seen, it does appear that quantity is an important point, as well as what they protect generally. So for example, before Facebook went for its IPO, they actually had to buy additional patents from AOL. They'd already bought patents from Friendster and HP, as well as filing for their own patents. But there was a fear that they didn't have enough patents. And in fact, IP was considered to be a very important factor for their IPO. So why was this? Well, because patents, as a form of intellectual property, that is to say idea protection, patents are particularly important for both defense and offense. So offense is someone copies your idea, you have a patent, you go after them in court. But defense is if someone decides to attack you for patent infringement, you can use your patents as a defense. In the case of Facebook, one of the concerns, one of the reasons why they decided to buy the AOL patents is because there was a fear at the time that Yahoo might attack them. Now, of course, we look back on this and say, well, how could Yahoo attack Facebook? But at the time of Facebook's IPO, that was a real danger. And so the AOL patents were bought, at least in part, to help Facebook defend itself from other companies such as Yahoo. At this level, at the IPO level, other companies will not hesitate to attack you, and litigation can get really expensive. So you want to have both a defense and an offense strategy built in, and this is the reason to be certain before you go IPO that you have a big, strong portfolio of patents. Now we're going to turn to sale as an exit strategy. Oh, I already see a question. Hang on a second. What was the question? The initial patent is a provisional until it's approved in a few years. I see, yes. So a provisional application is a temporary application. It can be filed only in the US. It only lasts 1 year. And it gives you 1 year's worth of protection for your date in order to enable you to continue the process. If you continue the process after filing your provisional, you will receive that filing date for all the material in your provisional as though you'd filed all your subsequent applications by that date. So it basically gives you a foot in the door and allows you to say that you're first to file, which is important for patents. And we'll get to all this later on. So the question is, how do you answer investors who say, will the patent really be approved in the end? Well, that is actually a really tough question to answer. In the case, for example, of Facebook, when they went IPO, they had a ton of patents, but they also just had a lot of patent applications. I've actually seen companies get acquired on the basis only of patent applications and not even necessarily patents. And the reason for this is startups like patent applications represent potential. So the investor, of course, may worry. You may get the patent, you may not. But on the other hand, just having patent applications is not a bar to being sold. It won't block you from being sold. And I've seen plenty of startups get bought with only patent applications. For reasons we'll get into now as we go into sale as an exit strategy. So that's a great question. It won't prevent you from having your exit. And in fact, for the vast majority of startups, the vast majority of startups are not going to reach the level where they can go to court to defend their own patents. They will exit before them. So one way that I recommend my clients to answer investors who ask that question is, assuming this is in fact your exit strategy, well, we plan to be acquired before this issue is necessarily going to be closed. It can take years for the patent to issue as a patent. It'll be a pending patent application all that time. But we plan to get acquired in a time frame which would reasonably suggest that we would not necessarily see whether the patent application would be approved. And by reasonably suggest, I mean, say up to 5 years, maybe 6 years. That would reasonably suggest that you would be acquired before you would reach the end of the process with either a patent or having your patent application be forced to go abandoned. So that's what I recommend to do as an answer. And again, if you are going to be going for an IPO, if you're going for a very long-term strategy, then of course, maybe some of your earlier patents, maybe your earliest patent will be prosecuted to the end. And you might see if you have a patent or not. But even with a long-term strategy, you're still going to have a ton of patent applications that are pending. Even if you plan to go beyond the 5 or 6 years, so you might get to the end point with 1 or 2 patents, but you'll still have many more patent applications waiting in the wings. So again, it's not really a question for a startup. That's more a question for a startup that plans to go the IPO route, wants to defend its own patents. If you want to do that, that's awesome. By the way, if you send me your email address in the chat, we can set up a time to speak afterward. If in fact you do want to go IPO, and you want to know what about this long-term strategy for patents, then let's have a talk about that. And I'm happy to do that offline. But as I said before, for the vast majority of startups, the vast majority of my clients, sale is the exit strategy. They plan to be acquired by another company, and that is how they plan to make their exit. And that is how their investors will make their money, not through an IPO, but through a sale. Oops, sorry. There we go. Okay. So, exit strategy as a sale. A sale occurs, of course, when another company buys your startup. There are a few examples of different types of sales in different situations, and each one will impact the amount of money that you can reasonably expect to be raised through the sale. So for an acqui-hire, the numbers I've seen bouncing around is you should allow a valuation for the startup when it's sold of about between $1 million to $1.5 million per employee. So let's say you had 5 employees at the time of the acquihire, then you would be looking at a valuation for your startup of between 5 million to 7.5 million. An acquihire means that the company buying your startup is only doing so to be able to hire the employees of your startup. They're not interested in your technology. They're not interested in your patents. They are only interested in your employees. So we can think of it as being a really expensive recruiting tool. For that reason, the valuations tend to be low. For other situations, let's say a company wants to buy you because of your technology and also your patents and your other aspects of your valuation. It's not just your employees, it's the whole complete package. Well, in that case, the valuation at the time of sale, it's still a bit difficult to figure out. For one thing, you may be growing rapidly, your revenue may be growing rapidly, but you may not yet be profitable. It may be hard to forecast what your revenues are going to be, especially in the hands of the larger company. So different valuation models, of course, can be based at least in part on the last valuation, the last time you raised money. Although often you will want to sell your company at least a certain period of time after your last raise. So this may or not be helpful, but it'll help put kind of a floor, or at least tell the purchasing company kind of where the floor should be. As well as models based on future revenue. Now here, we're not just talking about your own startup's future revenue if you were to continue for the next 5 years. We're also talking about models based on future revenue based on your value to the larger company, what I call the big co. So for example, if you have a great idea and your customer acquisition is going fantastically and you have low churn, meaning your customers stay with you, and you're doing a really great job with, say, maybe a low customer acquisition cost and a high customer lifetime value. So you hit all of these wonderful points and you're doing really well, but you just don't have a ton of money for marketing. Well, then basing the value of your company on the likely revenue in 5 years really isn't fair, because the bigger company could afford to pour in marketing dollars, and they could afford to scale, and they could afford to hire extra employees quickly and help you acquire that extra technology to make your technology even better. So they could do a lot of things to increase your sales that you might not be able to do yourself. Sorry, I just had a cough there for a second. So you have to also look at synergies with the bigger company. What are you worth to the bigger company synergistically? This, of course, brings to the ultimate value of your company at the time of sale, which is whatever your company is worth to that big co, to the big company. If that company thinks you're worth $100 million, well, then that's what they're prepared to pay. If you don't think that's enough, then you need to convince them otherwise. You have to show them why. You have to show them what other value you bring to the table that maybe they haven't fully considered. So what's important for a sale is, of course, strong growth. Basically, a larger company is going to be looking very significantly at your growth. How strong is your growth? How fast is your growth? Maybe it's not hockey stick, but is it strong and fast? And has it been increasing? It's also going to look at reproducible customer acquisition and retention. This includes things like customer lifetime cost, although again, if your customer acquisition or retention is very good, but your costs for doing so are high, then the bigger company could choose to discount this based on the fact that perhaps that quote-unquote high customer acquisition cost for them isn't so high. Also, of course, you have to have excellent technology. And yes, patents are important, because patents in this case are one very, very important reason for a big company to buy your company, to buy your startup, and not to copy it. We'll get into a story a little later on where one company had great technology and no patents, and they're going great guns. They were selling lots of their app in the iTunes store, and life was good until another company came into the space and copied all of their technology. And this other company didn't have any innovations of its own, but it copied the first company's technology and then just swamped them with tons of marketing dollars. And it kind of blew the smaller company that didn't have so much marketing dollars right out of the water. So a big company is going to make a strategic decision. If you have patents that they are worried could block them, or even worse, if they got into the hands of their competitors, could really block them because their competitors could afford to go to court against the big co, well, then they're more likely to buy you. Otherwise, they have less of an incentive to buy you. They might still decide to do it. Maybe you have some kind of deep technology, which is really worthwhile. But it makes it easier for them to decide they could just copy your ideas and not to buy you, which is not the decision you want them to make. You want them to make the decision to buy you. So patents are super important in this case. So do patents help a sale? Well, they help for a few reasons. One of which is the fact that big companies typically have patents, and big companies often want to buy like a mini-me. They want to buy a company that looks like a miniature version of themselves, only much better in ways that perhaps they lack. So since big companies typically have patents, they are obviously going to be enamored of startups who also have patents. It means that they have an extra asset which not only increases the value of the company, but would also then allow the big company to defend the acquired technology and the acquired know-how and the acquired market share against other companies, and then to increase that market share by blocking other companies from entering. Another big point, as I mentioned before, is FOMO, fear of missing out. Big companies don't want someone else to get your patents. In other words, if part of their calculation is if another company buys your startup, and that other company gets the patents, what would happen to the big company? If it's bad, they're more likely to want to buy you. Oh, I see some people just joined us. Welcome, hello. Just a couple of quick points here. If you put a question into the Q&A, then you can ask questions anonymously. I also have a chat that I started at the beginning of all this. If you put a question into the chat, only I will see it, but it will not be anonymous. Also, if at any point you have a hard time hearing me, please feel free to put in something either to the Q&A or into the chat, and then I'll do my best to fix everything technically. So, let's see. For these reasons, patents also mean it's better to buy your startup than to copy, as I said before, and of course they also increase the valuation of the startup. Now you might think, well, increasing the valuation of my startup, how does that help me get sold to a big company? Wouldn't they want a cheap price? The answer is not necessarily. One thing for big companies, if they see that your startup is worth more, well, they may also want it more. This works in consumer psychology as well as business psychology. But another reason is that with a higher valuation based on patents, you are more likely to reach an agreement with the big company. In other words, the big company may want to pay a certain amount based on probably fairly strict valuation criteria. You may feel that based on potential, your startup is worth a lot more. And patents can help you increase the valuation of your startup so you can kind of meet together, meet in the middle and have a valuation that both sides accept. And I see I have a question. And the question is, oh, that everything's going great. Awesome. Happy to hear it. So again, increasing the valuation of your startup, although it may sound counterintuitive, may actually help you sell yourself to a big company, as then both sides will be more likely to be able to reach an agreement on the valuation at which these startups should be sold. So what kind of patents do big companies love? Remember, I call big companies big co's because that's what they are. Not all patents are created equal. The most valuable patents do two things. They protect the core of your business, that is the part of your business without which your business would fall apart, would be lost. And they also block competitors from entering your market niche. And again, FOMO is a big factor for big co-valuation of patents. The more you can either cause damage to them by having your patents fall into the hands of competitors, or cause damage to their competitors by enabling the big co to use the patents against their competitors, well, then the more likely the big co's to think of, wow, fear of missing out. I may miss out on this awesome opportunity and these patents may go to someone else. I really need to have these patents. So those are the kind of patents you want to have in order to increase your valuation and to attract another company, a big co, to buy you. So why file your patent? Well, as I said before, it increases your valuation, but here's a few other reasons. Even before you decide that you want to be sold, patents give you control. That is ultimately what patents do. You can decide how others can use your idea. You can, if you decide you don't want someone to use your idea, you can prevent anyone from using it. If you decide you want to have maybe two different kinds of licenses, one kind for commercial use for regular companies, another one for nonprofits, you can do that too. Patents allow you to decide how others can use your valuable ideas or not to use them. You can block others from patenting your idea. This is a super important point. If you work on your idea in secret for 2 years, and I work on my idea for only a month, and I don't know about your idea, I've never heard of you, I've never heard of your idea, I just happen to think of a similar idea independently. If I work on my idea for only 1 month and I file for a patent before you, then I can block you from filing for a patent, and I can even block you later on from using your idea. The reason why is if you work on your idea for 2 years without publishing it, without selling it or putting it on your website or TED Talk, whatever, then it doesn't matter how long you worked on your idea. If I file first, then I win. And of course, you can also keep big companies from stealing your idea. And again, this is a super important point. You want to encourage those big companies to buy you. If acquisition is your strategy, then you need to do anything you can to encourage the big companies to buy you and not to steal your idea. And patents are a great way of doing that. So what kind of idea? Here's blockchain idea, but any kind of idea you want to patent, you want to patent the heart of your business, the part of your business you couldn't live without. You want to patent anything that the user experiences. Now, of course, your back office solution is really important to supporting your UX or your user experience. But what customers experience, what your users experience, that's what they're paying for. They're paying for a solution. I'm sure you've heard the saying a ton of times, people don't want to buy a drill, they want to pay for holes in the wall. And that's what a drill gives you. So if the best solution for having holes in the wall is a drill, then they're going to buy a drill. The same thing is true with your great idea. What they want for your great idea is a solution. And they're looking for a solution to their problem. And so what they experience in the way your solution works as far as the user is concerned, that's what really attracts them, and that's what's going to keep them. So you need to make certain that your patent covers all the aspects of the user experience. So if someone else copies these aspects of the user experience, even with a different back office solution, you can still block them. Don't wait to file. If someone else files before you, it's like this, road closed, you're done. First to file wins, and it's an absolute bar. The closest amount of time I've seen between filing 2 patent applications was 19 days. It was between Snap, known at the time as Snapchat, and one of its competitors. They both filed for an idea where if you hold down the camera button on a mobile phone, it'll toggle to video mode. Now, in this case, Snapchat and the competitor were filing under the old rules where it wasn't first to file, but nowadays, only the new rules apply, in the US as well. US used to be old rules, now US is only new rules. Under the new rules, with the 19-day divide, whoever files first would win, even if it was only a day separating them. It doesn't matter how little time is separating, whoever files first wins. So don't file too late. If you have a great idea, you need to file fast. Otherwise, someone else could file before you and not only block you from filing for a patent, they could actually block you from using your idea. They could actually block your whole startup. So are there any more questions before we get into how to file your patents? I've told you all the great ways that patents benefit you if you want to be sold, if you want someone to acquire you. And I've also told you what patents can protect generally and also how they can help you. So do we have any questions before we go on? Okay, someone asked if it matters if you have a patent or a patent application. For increasing the valuation of your company, it can be a patent application. At the very beginning, I showed a slide which showed that filing for a patent increases the valuation of your startup by $1 million. That's a rule of thumb by VCs. I've had VCs tell me this number. I've seen VCs publish this number. It just seems to be what the rule of thumb that everyone accepts. And that can be a patent application. It doesn't have to be a patent. So you can get a lot of benefit from filing for your patent application even before it actually turns into a patent. And another question is, okay, this is a good one, yes. If you want to have protection outside the US, will a US patent help you? The answer to that is no. Patents are per country. The patent laws and the patent system were started in the 18th century which is the beginning of the nation states. So that's, of course, when the US came into being as a country, and many other countries also formed at that time. So what it means is you have to file in each country where you want to have a patent. So if you want to have patent protection in the US, you have to file in the US. If you want to have patent protection in China, then you have to file in China. If you file for a patent in the US, then someone in China can still copy your idea. They can't sell your idea in the US. They can't import, your product or your software, whatever, into the US. But they could make your idea, they could sell your idea, et cetera, in China. So it's really important to file in all countries in which you're interested. One side note that is important: if you want to file in the US, you can publish your idea, like on YouTube, website, or by selling your product, and then still file for a patent within 1 year, and you can still get patent protection. But outside the US, in all countries, including Europe and China, if you want to get patent protection in those countries, then you have to file for your patent before you publish your idea. So before you sell your idea, before you release it publicly, before you give that TED Talk, before you put the idea on your website. So those are really important points. Does having more than one patent help your valuation? Yes, it does. It's approximately $1 million per patent. If you have a huge portfolio, of course, then you can set up what is known as a patent thicket, meaning you can have so many patents that it's really hard for anyone to be able to get around you and get around your ideas. So for that reason, having more than one patent is super helpful, and even having quite a few can be very useful. I would say quite a few would be at least 5 patent applications. You don't have to file them all at once. You can file them sequentially. Start by filing one, and then later on, maybe in a year or so, you file another one, et cetera. So you can keep on adding to your patent portfolio. Okay, let's go on then with how to file your patent. So patents provide the broadest protection for your idea. Idea protection is known as intellectual property. Intellectual property is the property of ideas. This is otherwise known as intangible property because you can't put your hand on it. But like regular property, like a car or a house, you can buy, sell, or rent your idea, just like a car or a house. The problem, though, in order for ideas to have values, you have to share them. So this is a problem. Every time you share your idea, you risk someone from being able to copy it. So how do you protect your idea? Well, the patents are the broadest way to do this. Patents are the best defense against copycats because patents protect the core of your idea. And you can use patents to block competitors from entering your space. So this is super important. If you define a market niche that you want to protect and you file for patents in that area, you can keep your competitors from coming in to your market niche. This is really important when being acquired because big cos want to be able to defend a market niche. They don't want to buy you and then find out that all their competitors can copy your ideas, and then they've bought very little. What they've bought doesn't have so much value. So the fact that you can block competitors from entering your space, maybe you think, well, I'll never go to court. That doesn't matter. The big company, the acquiring company, will. And so you want to have a situation with patents where you can block competitors from entering your space so the big company can take advantage of that. So what is patentable? What can you protect with a patent? Well, anything under the sun made by the hand of man or woman. This was actually in a Supreme Court case in the US in the 1970s, I believe 72, in which it was decided that you can actually patent genetically engineered bacteria. Examples of things that can be patented, well, software, hardware, high tech, all of these things are patentable. Now, I know software for the US, there's been a lot of discussion how software patents have become more narrow, they're harder to get. There was a Supreme Court decision a couple years ago called the Alice decision, which seemed to narrow the kinds of patent protection you could get for software, but it's still extremely broad. The US has the broadest protection for software of any country in the world. And by broad, I mean really broad. Not only is the technology involved in the software patentable, but also the application of known technology to solve a new business problem in a new way, known as a business method patent, that is still patentable, as long as the business method is implemented in software or a combination of software and hardware. Now, folks have said the business method patents are dead. This is definitely not the case. Last year, in the second half of last year, there were a huge number of decisions that went in favor of software patent owners. Appeals courts upheld the validity of these software patents and hence of the software patent owners' rights. So software patents are still very strong in the US. They have to be written correctly. You have to have a correct strategy, but you can get software patents issued in the US, and you also can defend them. Other examples of ideas which are patentable include mechanical devices, chemicals, drugs, proteins, etc. So basically technology. Any kind of technology is, generally speaking, in a patentable category. So what is not patentable? Well, let's say that your idea is more based on content, like music, images, books, or video. That is protected by copyright. Copyright is a much more narrow right. Unlike patents, where you can protect your broad idea as well as related ideas from copycats, with copyright, you can only protect the exact idea itself. It has to be pretty much a one-on-one copy before you can defend your idea with copyright. Copyright is actually registered in the US, although it's not registered in other countries. One confusing note is that software code is protected with copyright, but software ideas are protected with patents. So again, copyright for your code, fantastic. If someone rewrites the code, you're out of luck. However, if you patent your software ideas and someone tries to copy them, then you can defend those ideas quite generally. Names, logos, and slogans are all protected by trademarks, like Coke, Coca-Cola, Coke the real thing, and of course the famous Coke logo. Those are all protected by trademarks or marks under which you trade or do business. Now, another important point, which is not always appreciated, is anything you want to keep secret is not patentable. The reason why is patents involve a contract between you as the inventor and the general public. The general public wants to benefit by having you publish your idea, describe it. So therefore, it is required under the patent law for you to describe your idea in a patent application with text and drawings, which we'll get to in a minute, so that the general public can understand it. More specifically, so that someone of ordinary skill, that is someone who understands your field, so they'd be able to understand your idea from your patent. Now, if you want to keep your idea secret, of course, well, then you're not going to be able to fulfill your end of the contract, and then you won't be able to get the patent. So trade secrets, or things about your business you want to keep secret, are generally not patentable. One way to kind of have your cake and eat it too is to file for a patent only in the US. If you file only in the US, then you can request non-publication, meaning that your patent application won't publish. It will only publish once it becomes a patent. That's only the case if you file only in the US. Any questions so far? Okay, yes, we're going to get into a moment about what you need for the text and drawings. So let's go on. So what is a patent anyway, and why do you need it? Well, this is kind of a summary slide. By the way, if you email me, then I will send you this patent deck. If you want to put your email address in, you can just put it into, you can put it to the Q&A, but you probably should put it into the chat because then only I'll see it. And of course, if you also put your email address into the chat, not only will I send you the deck, but also we can set up a time to have a call so I can answer all your questions about your specific situation. But this is simply a summary slide that talks about, what is a patent, type of idea protection, how do you patent it? You describe your idea with text and drawings, you have to file a patent application, it's examined. If the examiner determines that your idea is worthwhile for a patent, then you get a patent. Oh, I think I see a question. Yes. Okay, yes. A request for the deck, no problem. I see here that you put the request in, and I will definitely send it to you. Anyway, once you file for your patent application, you submit it to the relevant government body. In the US, this is the US Patent and Trademark Office. And then you wait to be accepted to see if you can actually have a grant. Is your idea patentable? Your idea has to be novel and non-obvious. Basically, it has to be inventive. It has to go beyond what is already known. And you also have to be the first one to patent it. Oops, see a few more questions coming up. Yes, okay, no problem. I will send those decks and 2 more questions. And fantastic. I see here. By the way, if you put the request for the deck into the Q&A, it's anonymous, which means I don't see you, and I can't send it to you. So please do give me your email address if you want to have the deck. And of course, afterward, we'll also be sending you the ebook, which is separate from the deck. So you can get a patent in 4 simple steps. You do a search to see if you're first. You prepare the drawings and text. Like I said before, the drawings and text describe your idea. They tell the story of your idea. You need to have at least 7 to 10 pages of drawings and then text to describe the drawings. You then file your patent application. And as I mentioned before, the examiner checks your patent application. Now, this sounds so simple. You think to yourself, wow, I could get a patent quickly in a few weeks or months. No. Here's the problem. Search you can do quickly. Google has a great patent search. Just Google patents or talk to me and I'll show you how to do it. And then you can do a really great patent search using the Google technology. It works really well. So search is not hard. And of course, we also do professional searches. Preparing the drawings and text, I'm going to show you an example of a patent drawing later on. Not difficult to do. If you can whiteboard your idea, you can do your patent drawing. So again, this doesn't have to take a lot of time. You then file your application. I say this takes a day, but you can now file electronically at the US Patent and Trademark Office. It's pretty much instantaneous. The user interface is not so friendly, but at least it's not difficult to do. The problem, though, with all this, the first 3 steps can go super fast. You can get everything filed. You're in great shape, but then it comes to a screeching halt. The examiner checks your patent application, which can take 1 to 5 years or more, very slow. So why is this? Well, the reason why it takes so long is they have a big backlog, and human beings have to actually examine it, and they have to check it against all of these patent requirements. So what you need to do is to basically be patient, but you also then will need to be able to defend your idea once the examination starts. So again, having the patent application be pending for a startup is not a bad thing. It represents potential. Until examination starts, you can argue that you should enjoy very broad claims. And until the examination starts, no one will actually know what will come out. Now, the US Provisional Application is the best way to start. So what is the US Provisional? Well, the US Provisional enables you to file fast. It has the fewest regulations or rules. It's only in the US, but it helps you to file fast and beat the competition. You can change your patent within a year. You can change it before the end of the year when you need to file for a regular US patent application or to file perhaps internationally in other countries. There are fewer requirements. If you can whiteboard your idea, you can file for a provisional. Again, the rules and regulations and requirements are much, much simpler for a provisional application, which is one reason why it's faster. It's cheaper, but it gives you full coverage. It gives you the same coverage during that year as a full application because it gives you the right to that date. And remember, filing first wins. Whoever files first wins. So you file your provisional fast, you will win. And that's what a provisional enables you to do. Enables you to file quickly, cheaply, and to win. Here's an example of a patent drawing. This is a system with boxes and lines. This is actually taken from one of the Facebook patents with Mark Zuckerberg as one of the inventors. As you can see, there are user devices connected to a server, shown here as a social network provider, through a network. It seems to be a rule that networks are always shown as fluffy clouds in patents. I don't think it's actually a rule, but everyone always does it. And the social network provider, that's the server, is connected to a mini feed engine. This was one of the earliest patents for the news feed. So you can see how simple this is. This is a system with blocks and lines. Let's say you want to show a flow. Step 1, step 2, step 3, you want to show a process. Well, then you can have blocks with arrows showing the direction of the flow of the process. It's really, really easy. Patent drawings are not hard to do. Again, if you can whiteboard your idea, you can do your patent drawings. So can you do this yourself? Well, you need to know the following. First of all, startups can be complicated. And patents are no exception to this. Patents themselves are quite complicated. Even though provisional applications, for example, have fewer rules, they still have rules. And if you don't follow them, you could find yourself without a provisional application or without any value to the provisional application. You really need a strategy. Now, this is true for everything, right? If you're a startup, you need a marketing strategy. You need a sales strategy. You need a technology development strategy. You need a strategy for when you're going to approach investors. You need an exit strategy. You also need to have a strategy for idea protection, particularly for patents. Patents do have rules and regulations, and if you make a mistake, you may accidentally forfeit valuable patent rights. You also need to be confident that you're making the right choice. So in the case of patents in particular, there are strict deadlines as to when you can file. So here's an example. You want to file for a patent in China or Europe or any other country outside the US. You have to file for your patent, possibly by filing a US provisional application, because remember that gives you that date that you need. You have to do that though before you publish your idea, before you offer it for sale, before you put it out on the App Store, on iTunes or Google Play, before you talk about it on your website in detail, before you put out that YouTube video, before you give that TED Talk. So you need to be careful. If you do want to have patent protection outside the US, you have to file for a patent really early on in the game. Even if you decide you only want to have patent protection in the US, you still have to file for a patent, even if it's a provisional application. Doesn't matter, you still have to file for your patent within 1 year of publishing your idea. If you miss that 1 year date, there are no exceptions. You're toast. You cannot file for a patent. So even if you're only a day late from your publication, you still can't file for your patent in the US. And outside the US, of course, you can't file once you publish at all. So if you fail to make a decision, if you aren't consciously thinking about your strategy, and if you don't have a patent strategy, you don't know how you're going to protect your ideas, you could accidentally make a decision to lose those idea protection rights, to lose those valuable patent rights, just by mistake, just by not making a decision. So you want to always be confident that you're making the right choice by having all of the information in your hands. That's super important. So again, if you have any questions, please be certain to put that email address in the Q&A or put it into the chat, please, and we'll set up a time to talk. And I'll answer your questions so you can be confident that you are making the right choice. Now, how can we help? Well, we don't work on hourly-based fees. Most patent attorneys, and like all lawyers, charge by the hour. We don't do that. We have fixed price packages. You only pay for what you need, and you know exactly how much things will cost before you get started. We have different packages tailored to your needs, so you have full control over what you get. Don't buy something you don't need. Don't buy something unnecessary. Only buy what you need, and we can help you decide what you need. We also give you full support to protect your idea because we have lots of experience with software companies and startups, including many of my clients who have gone on to exits, largely again through being bought by another company. Our basic patent package is $2,500. It covers the US provisional patent application process for you. If you do the drawings, we do the rest. But we'll also give you a 10% discount if you order it with our Webinar 10 promo code. But your special discount for this webinar, for a limited time only, we have our basic patent package on a super special discount, 20% off. Just add webinar promo code at the checkout process to the KISS patent pricing and services. It works for our basic provisional patent application package, but if you want another package, you want a search, you want a strategy, you're not sure what you need, give me a call. Send me your email address and I'll email you back and we'll set up a time to call. And then we'll be able to discuss the package that's right for you at that awesome 20% discount for this webinar only. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining. I'd be happy to answer more questions now, or alternatively, like I said, give me your email address and we'll set up a time to talk and I'll answer all your questions then and I'll send you the deck. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. And again, send me those questions.